The complexities of addiction. So, what is addiction? An addiction stems from the foundations of a neurological dysfunction that requires a reward. The body will not stop or be satisfied until the brain receives the pleasure of that reward. There are many forms of addiction, including substance abuse, social media, food, and more. An addiction is also the inability to stop using substances, even though they cause harm. Chronic addiction can affect many facets of a person's life, including their ability to sleep, form meaningful relationships, and their ability to work. The complexity of addiction illustrates the significant impacts on an individual's physical and mental health, emotional well being, and financial stability. Through looking at the vast sectors of addiction, it is important to understand how addiction affects an individual as well as how the condition develops. This research hypothesizes if an individual is exposed to addictive tendencies in their childhood, they are more likely to develop an addiction during their lifetime. Secondary research number 1. Individuals who experience addictive compulsives are more likely to co-occur with mental health conditions like anxiety and depression. According to Volko and Koob, addiction related to alcohol can result in modifications to the brain's structure and function that affect emotion, cognition, decision-making, and impulse control. Those who struggle with addiction exhibit less activity in the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain in charge of planning, making decisions, and exercising self-control. 2. The secondary research conveys that addiction significantly impacts emotional regulation and processing and can cause the emergence of negative emotions like anxiety, sadness, and anger. There are many possible causes for the connection between behavioral and emotional regulation and addiction. However, it is prominent that mental health disorders percept the regulations of addictive tendencies. Due to addiction's pleasure response, many might not understand the full extent of their actions or the addiction's effects. 3. According to research, individuals who battle addiction frequently deal with a range of financial difficulties, including loss of employment, reduced income, increased debt, and legal expenses. Despite considering other sufficient variables, it was discovered that citizens with addiction had a greater probability of losing their jobs than individuals with previous criminal records and inconclusive education status. Parents who use substances are more likely to cause their children to receive financial payments, meaning working jobs at younger ages, and the inability to attend school. The research represents the impact of addiction financially, indicating that financial loss is a major consequence of addictive compulsives. 4. According to research, addiction is linked to a wide variety of physical alignments, such as heart, lung, and liver diseases, as well as infectious diseases, including hepatitis and HIV. The main impact on physical health is facilitated by the occurrence of drug overdoses. Addicts are more likely to use drugs carelessly or in conjunction with other drugs, increasing the risk of overdosing. For instance, the consumption of drugs can result in an array of cardiovascular complications, including heart attacks, strokes, and hypertension. Effects of addiction on physical well-being may occur through changes in sleeping habits, unprotected sexual behavior, cancer, liver and kidney issues, disease in the veins, and more. Secondary research also proves that addiction can result in various bodily complications, starting through the body and then advancing. So for my primary research, I started by researching family addiction and their impact. This graph was made using the survey question, how did the addiction affect you? The research intended to use the data to represent the emotional instability correlated between addicted family members and the emotional impact on one's well-being. The data reveals that 42 individuals reported a negative impact on their emotions due to addiction within their family. This suggests that addiction not only affects the individuals directly involved, but indirectly affects their family members. Only 4 individuals reported a positive impact, indicating that the emotional effects of addiction are predominantly negative. Furthermore, the data illustrates 20 respondents expressed no specific impact on their emotions. This data could imply that respondents may not be fully aware of the emotional impact, experience an addictive family member, or have suppressed their emotions. The data reveals that 2 people claim to have had physical repercussions, such as a decline in their physical health. Additionally, 3 of the respondents stated that their addiction harmed their mental health, demonstrating that addiction might aggravate pre-existing disorders and worsen mental health problems. The graph additionally emphasizes that 11 participants had substantial negative effects from addiction on emotional wellness. This demonstrates that addiction has a tremendous impact on an individual's emotional state and generates physical consequences. Half of the respondents, 33 or 50%, indicated that addiction negatively impacted their emotional, mental, and physical well-being. This demonstrates how extensive and varied the effects of addiction on health are. A lack of awareness or rejection of the harmful effects might be evident in the 19 people who indicated that addiction had no noticeable impact on their health. The number of people in the graph who have personally experienced the financial effects of addiction are 24. This emphasizes the damaging effects addiction can have on one's financial situation, including the price of substance misuse, the cost of treatment, the cost of legal representation, and the possibility of job loss or decreased productivity. Additionally, 29 people have relatives that struggle with addiction. This shows that addiction has a direct financial impact on the addict and an indirect financial impact on their relatives. The financial strain may result from paying for a loved one's treatment, such as medical bills, therapy, and other associated costs, highlighting the extent to which addiction has an adverse financial impact. Only 3 people stated that they have never personally dealt with the financial effects of addiction. Furthermore, 10 respondents weren't personally affected by addiction. Despite that the statistic does not specifically address the financial effects of addiction, it can be used as a contextual reference to better comprehend the viewpoints and experiences of individuals who are not directly impacted by addiction. This graph illustrates that 35 people answered yes to the option of whether addiction had an impact on their emotional cognition. This shows that addiction has a significant impact on mood and behavior, resulting in observable changes in a person's emotional state and behaviors. Additionally, 18 participants gave a maybe response, indicating some skepticism regarding the way addiction affects mood and behaviors. This uncertainty emphasizes how complicated addiction's impacts are, as some people may not fully comprehend or acknowledge them. However, 13 respondents categorically disagreed with the idea that addiction affects mood and behavior and responded with a definitive no. These individuals might hold alternative beliefs or have experienced different outcomes, suggesting that addiction's impacts on mood and behavior can vary among individuals. Overall, the data indicates that addiction has a notable influence on one's mood and behavior, although the extent and perception of this impact may vary among individuals. So for my research conclusion, this research hypothesizes that individuals exposed to addictive tendencies in their childhood are more likely to develop an addiction during their lifetime. The hypothesis is supported by primary research, which observed a significant correlation between childhood exposure to addictive behaviors and the subsequent development of addictions in adulthood. Additionally, secondary research offered reliable support for this connection. These results imply that early exposure to addictive behaviors can influence a person's susceptibility to addiction in their adulthood. The results of the research are substantial in understanding the correlation between addiction and an individual's life. For example, one of the main causes of addiction relates to genetics. Genetics factors contribute to 40 to 60% of the vulnerability to drug addiction, establishing that addiction is more frequent in families with addictive relatives. The research also illustrates comprehensive data and indicates how family dynamics are effective, the effects on individuals' mental, physical, emotional, and financial. So what was I hoping to find? I was hoping to find 4 main topics. So for number 1, does addiction worsen in age? As research briefly explained, addiction is caused by genetics. However, I was hoping to find a more broad explanation on the causes of addiction and age and the primary effects of addiction on different age groups. Number 2, How does a social event impact the risk of addiction? And what are the specific factors that contribute to the development of addiction in different populations? Essentially, I was hoping to understand how peer pressure navigates through an individual's brain and causes them to become addicted to certain substances. 3. What are the barriers and facilitators to accessing and engaging in addiction treatment? When researching, there were limited explanations on the subject of treatments. Therefore, I would have hoped to find how barriers in treatment such as finance impact a pre-existing addiction. And lastly, how does addiction affect young adults, primarily high schoolers? My research focused on the age range of 20 plus, indicating the broad spectrum. However, as a high schooler myself, I would have wanted to understand how addiction affects high schoolers and if it is possible, perhaps the involvement of social media than it was 10 years ago. Thank you so much for listening to my presentation, and I hope you learned a lot about addiction. Thank you.